I worked at a local government agency for a long time. Each summer we would get a new crop of interns. Most were fine. Some caused issues, like when we caught 2 of them making out in the file room. Overall, they were just normal kids from high school or college, trying to get some work experience. In 2016, my department received an intern later than usual, right in the middle of the summer. Warner was a bit older than the usual crowd, around my age, maybe in his late 20s. We initially hit it off pretty well, and although I found him sort of strange, I didn't mind since he was friendly and we shared common interests. He was the only person in my department who was even close to my age. The interns were all teenagers, and the regular staff averaged around 60, older than my mom. I was psyched to have a peer to chat with, so occasionally I would eat lunch with Warner or stop to talk at his cubicle. His strangeness was mostly an outsized personality, a mix of over-the-top enthusiasm with a bit of social awkwardness. I got 0 bad vibes from the guy. It wasn't long, though, before Warner started having major performance problems at work. He would produce little to no work on most days, no show or arrive late without informing anyone, and generally acted pretty unprofessionally. One day he showed up for work at 3:15, when our workday ended at 4:30. The office manager was livid, and told him to go home. His behavior bothered nearly everyone in my office, but I didn't supervise him, and we had plenty of slacker interns in the past. While his antics were a bit of a spectacle, it wasn't a big deal to me. If you're wondering why he wasn't let go, 2 words: political favor. I found out from Warner himself that he was hired because his uncle donated to the campaign of our big boss. He wasn't going anywhere. Near the end of the summer, I put in my notice that I was leaving my job and relocating to a new state. Once Warner caught wind of this, he would constantly complain that it sucked I was leaving, because we barely had time to become friends. I would always laugh lightly in response and give a sympathetic yeah. He would start to monopolize my time at work more and more, and it became disruptive to the people who sat near to me. I found it slightly annoying, but I was also extremely happy to be leaving that job for reasons unrelated to Warner, and I spent my last month there not caring much about what my coworkers thought. I tolerated him lingering by my desk. One day he caught me leaving work and offered me a ride home. I usually took the bus, and occasionally other coworkers would offer me rides home if they were going my way, so this didn't seem odd to me. I accepted and walked to his car with him. It smelled awful and was full of garbage. He hastily cleared off the passenger seat and apologized. We got on our way, but once we were on the main road, he started begging me to stop and get dinner with him. I laughed and said he didn't need to ask me that insistently, and said we could stop at a diner along the way. We had a nice meal with pleasant conversation. He was intelligent and had a variety of interests. Our political positions aligned, and we shared disdain for our cranky old coworkers. I had a good time. I expressed that he didn't need to drive me all the way home now that it was late, but he kept insisting, so I relented. As I directed him towards my house, he started in again with the whining about how our developing friendship was cut short because I was moving. At this point, I was getting tired of hearing this. The decision to leave my job and move away from home was an extremely difficult one to make, and I was proud of how bold I was being. I stopped responding and laughing, and his whining eventually faded out. We came up to the turn to get onto my street, and when I pointed it out, he accelerated and drove right past it, laughing. I laughed in an OMG what the fuck kind of way, thinking he was just joking around. When I began giving him instructions about how to turn around and get back, though, he started begging me to keep hanging out with him because he was lonely. This immediately set me on high alert. It suddenly hit me that I'm in a man's car, someone I don't know that well, who doesn't exercise proper behavior at work, which is the only context I know him in. Now he's displaying weird behavior outside of work as well. My instinct was to not insist to be let out of his car. I felt as if this would escalate the situation into something bad, and in hindsight, it might have been the right thing to do when I think about the type of person he turned out to be. I told him we could hang out in the park near my house if he wanted to talk. He seemed to like that idea, and we parked and walked over. The pleasant conversations resumed. Besides the weird clinginess, he was perfectly fine to talk to, until he started dumping his entire life story onto me, including his prior arrests for theft, his heroin addiction, and his struggles with depression. I tried to be sympathetic, but I was very put off by this. It was a lot of highly personal information at once, and I was still on alert because of his prior behavior. I tried changing the subject by showing him pictures of my dog. I scrolled one pic too far, and the next one was a photo of me wearing makeup and posing cutely, way different than the slob I was at work. He grabbed the phone from me and said, "Wow, you're very photogenic." I felt awkward and didn't say anything. There was a long silence before he launched into a weird tangent, going on about how compatible we are, that we have similar interests, and that he wishes I wasn't moving so we could try hanging out again, but on a date. I didn't say anything, so he broke the silence with, "Sorry I'm saying all of this stuff. I'm actually pretty high right now. And that's why I know where Riverside is. I went there yesterday to buy, otherwise I wouldn't have said it. Sorry." Internally, I freaked out. He had definitely put his drug addiction in the past tense, and I assumed it was something he was recovering from, not currently using. I also realized I had been in the car he was operating while he was under the influence. I don't know anything about heroin, so I was clueless, but I felt very, very stupid. He immediately started whining and begging me not to judge him or hate him, and kept saying over and over again how nice I am, how understanding I am, that I'm pretty and smart. All of these weird compliments interspersed while talking about himself. I didn't know what to do. I smiled reassuringly and told him not to worry, but that I was tired and wanted to go home. That's when he started bursting out crying. He had this weird wheezy sob, but no tears were coming out. I sat there quietly while he did this, trying to come up with some sort of graceful escape plan. My patience was wearing thin, and my anxiety was starting to get through the roof. It's a weird feeling to be annoyed and panicky at the same time. I stood up and apologized, said the park was close to my house so I'd walk, and started to leave when I remembered I left my stuff in his car. Trying a new approach, I casually mentioned I forgot my stuff in his car, and joked that if he wanted my dirty lunch containers, he could keep them. He ceased his bizarre crying, stood up and ran over to his car to unlock it, and I grabbed my stuff out of his back seat. His demeanor changed drastically, as he calmly apologized for making things weird, and asked if he could drop me off at home so I didn't have to walk alone at night. I said yes, but I made him drop me off a block from my little side street, so he didn't know which house was mine. I could end it there, but what bothered me the most about this guy happened after this encounter. I'll make this part sort of short. A week or two after that weird evening, end of August by this point, I had my last day at the job and moved 1,000 miles across the country. Warner would sometimes text me long ramblings detailing his feelings about himself and about our missed opportunity. I didn't respond to any of these messages. Now that I wasn't near him, I didn't feel the need to placate. The text stopped after a few weeks, and I forgot about him. Fast forward to February, and I get a text from a former coworker. Her message said, "Sorry you had to hear about it this way." Next to her message was a link to a local news article titled, "Man Dies from Wounds in Riverside Stabbing, Wednesday." Because of the way she worded it, I had thought Warner was the victim, but when I read the article, it included his mugshot and the charges. He was the attacker. He murdered someone. And I felt so shocked and disgusted. I couldn't believe I knew someone who had killed another human being. Later on, I called an old work friend for some details. Apparently, shortly after I left the job, he was fired for trashing the men's room. He threw around anything he could lift and poured all the soap out and smeared it all over the place. He then lost his apartment. I have to assume that's how he ended up in the aforementioned Riverside. There are a lot of homeless drug addicts who squat in abandoned houses. I wondered if the man he had stabbed had refused to give him something he wanted, and that's how he reacted to a hard no. I don't think I made all of the wisest decisions during my interactions with Warner, but I'm glad I was able to avoid setting him off. He was clearly not stable. So this happened on Halloween when I was about 11. My friend and I decided to go trick-or-treating. Yeah, we were a little old, but we just wanted some free candy. I lived in a very nice neighborhood, one of the ones where everyone gives out the full-size candy bars, so it wasn't unusual to have a lot of people come there to trick-or-treat. However, that also meant that there's about an acre of front yard for each house, so it took about 3 minutes to walk between each door. It was a good night for Halloween weather-wise. Not too chilly and not too rainy or anything. This is important later. It's approaching 8:30 p.m. at this point, and after hanging around on the golf course and appreciating our candy haul, we decide to start heading home and call it a night. The street I live on is a gigantic U-shape. A little over half a mile walk from the top of the U down the bend to the other side. We were walking towards the end of the U further away from my house, as we wanted to take the long way since it was such a nice night out. It's about 9 p.m. now, so no one else is really out anymore at this point. The people have all turned off their porch lights, the universal signal for no more trick-or-treaters. That's when we notice a lone white van, parked on the street. We made a joke about how it looks like the stereotypical kidnap vans, even with painted windows. That's when we notice it shift out of park, and slowly creep down the street towards us and park at the next house. Oh, they must have kids trick-or-treating or something. It wasn't uncommon for people to drive their kids from house to house, since they were so spread out in our neighborhood. But given that it was 9 p.m. and a night with nice weather, it struck us as a bit odd. We checked every few minutes, and it seemed to just be stopping from house to house like normal. We turned around again and kept walking at a leisurely pace, gossiping and whatnot. And that's when we hear the car squeal as it moved forward down the hill and park again, this time only about 2 houses away from us, on the opposite side of the street. Again, that's some weird trick-or-treating, but whatever. That's when we realized that there were no kids getting out of the van. Not even once. Now this was before my first phone, a red and white Samsung Propel since it was 2008. We were only 15 minutes from my house, but a bit disturbed, so we walked to the nearest door, rang the bell, and stuck our bags out in an attempt to act normal. A woman opens the door just a crack, and proceeds to berate us for trying to trick-or-treat at this hour. She slams the door before we could even get a word in. Okay, thanks, lady. We turn around, and the van is right there, parked in the wrong direction, on our side of the street. The windows are fully tinted, so we can't even see inside to see the man driving. Trying to keep our cool, we casually walk away from the door and up the street, into this cul-de-sac loop that's on the side of the street that makes up the bigger U. If you cut through that loop and hop a couple of fences, you can end up at my back door. The van goes the same way. Now we know for sure they're following us, since there's no reason to ever go up this side street otherwise. We break into a sprint, and I'm by no means athletic, but I hop those damn fences like an Olympian. We run inside my house, lock all the doors, and freak out while we sit in the front hall. Not 5 minutes later, the van slowly drives down the street, right past my house. We stress eat our candy and think about what could have happened if we hadn't been aware of our surroundings. A little background about me. I have PD, panic disorder. For those who don't know what it is, it's a mental illness that causes extreme anxiety, severe panic attacks, and a slew of other problems. I've been suffering from this for over a year now, and while it's finally getting better, it's been very difficult to deal with, so keep this in mind. My husband and I have been married for a little over a year now. The time we were married, unfortunately, I was undergoing medical issues that no doctors could seem to explain. I was having panic attacks all the time, and they would be so severe I would have to be taken to the ER, where they would have to sedate me to calm me down. I was also losing weight at an exponential and scary rate, becoming sicker and sicker as time went on. Not even a month after we married, I lost my job and was homebound, while my husband worked second shift, which was 4 p.m. to 3 a.m. He would arrive at home around 4 a.m., leaving me home alone most of the time. My parents and younger brother lived close by, perhaps a 10-minute drive at most, but at the moment my mother, who is a school teacher, and my father, who works in a factory, were unable to watch over me. They called as frequently as they could, but that was about all they could do. In May, I was told by doctors that I was literally at death's door, and unless something happened quick, my family was going to lose me. I was given medications to help with panic attacks and to get me to eat. They wanted to hospitalize me, but I refused. My parents decided that when they and my younger brother went to Florida the next month, they were taking me with them. Again, keep in mind I'm both anxious and extremely sick. Around this time is when my real issues began. Not with me, but with our neighbors. See, we've never actually met our neighbors personally. My husband lived in the trailer for a month on his own before we married, and he always said they were a bit odd but didn't seem to be of any concern. However, once I came into the picture, that all changed. The person who lived in the trailer before us was actually a cousin of mine, who rented from another cousin and his wife who lived states away. Nora was a huge druggie and a drug dealer, so people got used to getting their fixes and drugs at the trailer we now live in. Then, a few months before we moved in, she got in trouble with the law and landed in jail for some time. I guess our neighbors, who according to our landlords were drug addicts and raging alcoholics as well, thought that perhaps maybe she was back. I'm not quite sure. I suppose this is because from where I was so sick, and my husband slept when he could from both working odd hours and taking care of me, so they never actually saw us. They just knew someone was there. They became active mostly at night. During the day, they were predominantly quiet. Every once in a while, they would do something outside, but for the most part, nothing really happened. It was always after my husband left for work. My car was still there, which should have told him at least someone was still home. It started off innocently enough. Driving up and down in front of the house, parking in the road directly in front of it and waiting. They'd honk the horn, but I'd ignore them. Several times I called my parents, asking them what I should do. They said for the time to just ignore them, because maybe they thought Nora was back, and after some time they'd get the hint that it was new people and leave me alone. I did just that, for a time. When they started driving up the driveway and stopping at the porch, that's when I first called the cops. All I was told was that as long as they didn't encroach on my actual property, there was nothing they could do. They advised me to turn on the lights to my house, signaling I was home. I couldn't sleep, despite desperately needing to. I had mono and panic disorder/depression, so I needed to sleep. My husband had the weekends off, and you can guess it, no issues during the weekends. It was insane and infuriating. Everyone believed me when I said I was having problems, but there was only so much they could do. My father-in-law brought over one of his shotguns, a 12-gauge, knowing that I was a fairly decent shot. He told me to use it if need be. Another background thing is that I shot trap for years, and when I was 18 I placed second in districts. I chose not to go to state, but knowing I was good enough for second was a proud moment for me. My father-in-law made me promise I would use it if it came to it, so I did. One night my husband was at work, and I guess my body had finally shut off. I fell asleep for once, only to be woken up at around 1 a.m. by the sound of our neighbor's truck tearing out from behind the trailer. I jumped up, looked outside, to see them driving out of our driveway. They started speeding up and down in front of the house, and I called the cops again. I called my mom and my dad. My dad came over because I was in full panic attack. My dad called my husband, who came home immediately. There were tire marks in the grass behind the trailer, but they couldn't prove it was them, despite me describing their truck down to each and every dent. My dad told the cops this had been going on long enough, but again, not enough evidence or proof. A week. Just one more week until I could go with my family to Florida. I somehow managed to be a bridesmaid in my older brother's wedding, despite being so sick. I was doped up on medications to keep me calm, so I wouldn't have a panic attack, and to be honest, I don't recall much about the day other than it poured rain. My husband, naturally, was at work. I was sitting at home, our two cats asleep rather soundly. I was playing my 3DS with Markiplier on the TV for background noise, the time around midnight, when my cats suddenly sprang awake and became unglued. They ran to the side door, then the front door, growling and hissing, their hair on end. They had never behaved that way, so I started to get up to see what it was they were freaking out about, when I heard it. How are we gonna do this? I froze. I heard them. I heard their footsteps as they walked up and down the front porch. I wasn't sure how many they were, but I know for a fact there were at least 3 men outside. My curtains were closed, and most of the lights were off, but the TV was on, and surely they could hear Markiplier's eccentric volume. Maybe I'm not... They had gotten quieter. I heard their footsteps on the porch again. I grabbed my phone, shakily swiping until I found my dad's number and called him. I remember breathing hard, feeling a panic attack setting in. Hello? They're here, I remember sobbing. On the porch. Daddy, they want to get in. I'm on my way. Call the cops. I hung up with them, then heard them talking amongst themselves about how they wanted to break in, what they wanted. I ran into the bedroom, grabbed the 12-gauge, opened the chamber to see it fully loaded, and called the cops. I left the lights off. I decided I was going to have them caught this time. I wasn't going to run them off. The dispatch answered, and I told him what was going on. As sick as I was, I managed to hold that shotgun to my shoulder, pointed at the door, remembering everything my dad taught me about shooting while I was a hunter and when I shot trap. But I was still scared out of my mind. Somehow I kept my panic attack down for now, but I was still breathing very hard. Calm your breathing, hun. You said they're outside? Yes. I heard one say they heard me, and the other said that it wouldn't be a problem. Oh my God. They're coming, I promise. I'm armed. Excuse me? I'm armed, I yelled, hoping that they'd hear. With what, sweetheart? A 12-gauge. They want to hurt me, and I'm not going to let them. She's armed, I heard him tell the police, who I suppose were on their way. I heard armed from one of the guys outside, and then complete silence. I heard their footsteps leaving, then saw the lights on my dad's truck. I lowered the shotgun and ran outside, my dad and younger brother running out of the truck. My dad had the Judge in his hand, which is a pistol that shoots 12-gauge rounds, while my younger brother was holding a knife. It's my dad and brother. They're armed too. Okay, what of the men? I don't see them anymore. When the cops get there, disarm yourselves, okay? I thanked the dispatcher for everything, and at about this time the cops pulled up. I told my dad and younger brother to disarm, so they put their weapons in the truck while I took my gun inside and sat it on the kitchen, on top of our counter table. My dad told me to get back in the house, and for my younger brother to go with me. As soon as I stepped inside, the panic attack hit. My dad came inside for a moment and hugged me, telling me how brave I had been, especially for holding it in as long as I did. Shaking, crying, and gasping for breath, I listened as he went back outside. The cops found footprints and an area on the porch where the men had tried to break in at one point. The men had scattered, though, leaving it difficult for the cops to trace exactly where they came from. My dad told them it was the neighbors. My landlords actually called and told the cops it was more than likely our neighbors as well, who had apparently been giving my cousin who lives up the road a difficult time as well. The cops noticed some of the footprints went into the neighbor's yard, but they weren't home, of course. I remember my dad and younger brother standing outside just as the cops pulled up, yelling as loudly as they could that they would drop them if they ever so much as saw them around me again. Enough is enough, my dad yelled over and over. She's sick. She needs rest, so leave her the hell alone. I noticed that he was crying. My dad isn't the type of person to do that. My whole life, I've seen my dad cry maybe a handful of times. When he talked about his deceased father, when my mom's mom died, when the doctors told me I was on death's door, when my younger brother was born. My dad had been scared that he wouldn't get there in time, and maybe, just maybe, that I would hesitate to protect myself. But I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. That night, my husband came home from work and hugged me so tightly, I thought my lungs might burst. My younger brother texted him what was going on, but reassured him that I was okay. A week later, I went to Florida. Time went on, and I'm still getting better. As for my neighbors, I never had problems from them again. I'm not sure if it was the cops actually going to their house, or if it was my dad and younger brother threatening them. Or maybe it was me, them hearing me saying that I was armed. I don't know, and I don't care. They're still there, but I know they won't try anything with me ever again.